Welcome back to the Djellab channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys are doing very well at home. Today, I'm joined by two fantastic people. Alice, thank you for coming onto the channel. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. I'm happy because we beat Liverpool this weekend.
Yes, huge result.
As a Man United fan, and thanks for having me on.
No worries. Thank you so much for coming on. Patrick van Straten, you've got a residency here. The Patrick van Straten show, actually, it should be called. How's things?
Yeah, good. I'm like, what, like Adele in Vegas or something?
Yeah.
That's what this is. Yeah, it's good to be back. I'm actually kind of chill because we're not playing football at the moment, and every game right now is extremely stressful. So it's nice to just turn up, talk about some managers who I hate, and
move on and go home. Yeah, I think you're definitely more of the Adele in Vegas rather than the Elvis in Vegas. I think. That's for sure.
We'll see how this progresses as the season goes on. I guess.
Yes. But I do have a question actually before we get into the video. Patrick, Alice, and for the people at home, how do you feel about your security online?
Not good.
Well,
not good, especially, and I don't think you should, given the things that have been going on with your details recently.
Very good point. Very good point, actually, that. Yeah, please stop calling me in Wales. But lucky for you guys at home and for Patrick and myself and Alice, today's sponsor of this video is Surfshark VPN, who can help with just our issues. There are lots of different uses for Surfshark VPN, from encrypting your online data, which will keep you safe and secure when you connect to public Wi-Fi, to changing your location virtually, which can help massively. Because how annoying is it, Patrick, when you're on holiday, you want to watch the football, you want to use one of your subscriptions, your Sky Go, your TNT Sports app, whatever it might be, but you can't because you're not in the United Kingdom. It doesn't work. It gets a bit annoying, doesn't it?
Yeah, or for example, when you're in the middle of like watching something on Netflix and it's not on Netflix in the country you're in, like at the end of a long day on holiday, it's very frustrating, Zach.
Well, don't you worry, because Surfshark VPN can help exactly with that. You can connect super quickly to the United Kingdom or to one of those other countries and access your football. And for your case, and for a lot of other people, it's great because they get to see their team winning. But for me, not so good with Chelsea. Now look, also Surfshark VPN will allow you to log into as many devices as you want. Your mobile phone, tablet, iPad, desktop, you name it, you can log into it. It's all good. And I also can genuinely not thank Surfshark VPN enough for sponsoring this video. It makes doing this stuff so much easier. So thank you guys so much. If you go into the description, click on the link and also use my code or scan the QR code on screen right now, you'll be taken to the website. Use the code Djellab and you also get an extra 3 free months for nothing. 3 free months. Tough for you to say, that's for sure. Surfshark also offer a 30-day money-back guarantee as well, so there's no risk of trying it out for yourself. Now, let's get on to some managers, guys, who could probably do their own protection for some of their jobs.
Oh,
there we go, not too bad. And let's talk about what this title of the video is. And it's about football managers. Are they actually bad? Some of the guys we're going to talk about. Now, the list is... It's interesting, because I think there are some managers here who are... They're all at top roles, or were at top roles before they lost their jobs. And I think sometimes when you are in this world, you can get... I think just because you don't maybe perform at one of the best clubs in the world doesn't necessarily mean you are a terrible manager.
Sure.
Graham Potter, for instance, someone we'll get onto a little bit later, who had a really bad time at Chelsea.
Yeah,
but has proven...
not one of the best clubs in the world, but
okay, yeah, sure.
He did struggle at Chelsea.
Yeah,
yes,
sure, nicely done. But obviously has a great record from Brighton and so on and so forth, and we'll get onto him a little bit later. But I do want to start off with Chelsea and talk about the guy who's in charge right now, Mauricio Pochettino. Alice, firstly, before we get into kind of how it's going at Chelsea, he has previously been linked to Manchester United. He was obviously at PSG as well. Maybe didn't do as well as some people had hoped he would at PSG. How do you feel about Mauricio?
I think, I like Pochettino. When we were linked to him, I was like, I'm not against it, but Ten Hag was my first choice between those two. Because I always think back to Tottenham. He had to operate on very little budget. I think there was 1 or 2 winners where he got nobody brought in. And then he got into a Champions League final with basically no money spent. But the thing is with Pochettino, he hasn't won anything, or he didn't win anything at Tottenham. And then he'd gone to PSG and he was struggling with the big names, the big mentalities. And I was like, is this a good manager that might struggle at a big club because of the big names? I always thought with him.
Yeah, okay. And obviously now he's come to Chelsea, and he's coming to a Chelsea which is a little bit volatile at the moment.
Sure.
A lot of things going on. He joined a Chelsea side that had already had a lot of changes happen before him, to then even more changes. Another, 400 million spent, was it, in the summer? And a very young side, a side that had really no experience. The oldest age was, obviously, apart from Thiago Silva, was like Ben Chilwell at 27. And so there was a lot of, I think, changes for him to come in. And I think, obviously, with the way things have gone so far for Chelsea this season, not amazing. And also, I think in the game, most recently in the FA Cup quarter-final against Leicester, we saw him get a little bit of stick, I think. Obviously, he kept Raheem Sterling had a bit of a rough game in general. That's safe to say, but he kept him on, taking off someone like Mikhailo Mudryk, and fans started booing him, getting told, he started shouting, chanting, you don't know what you're doing, so on and so forth. But I don't know, man. There's something about Poch where, like, I struggle to look at other people out there and think, like, would they be doing much better in this scenario?
Yeah.
Like, his current win rate percentage is 49%. It's not amazing. It's not terrible. It's actually less than Frank Lampard's first season at Chelsea. It is better than Graham Potter's season. But he's already four losses away from being level with Thomas Tuchel. And how many losses he had in his entire time at Chelsea. At Chelsea, Tuchel was in charge for 100 games and lost just 16. And Maurizio's already lost 12 in about 40. So on that side of things, it's not great. It is also a very different side now to what Tuchel had in charge, which is also mental to say because it's only about 2 years difference at the moment. But Pat, if I ask you flat out, is Mauricio Pochettino a bad manager? What would your answer be?
Definitely not. I think he's an excellent manager. I mean, very recently, like 7 years ago, really, he was one of the better managers around because not only was he good with Tottenham, but he overachieved with them. He built that team into an excellent squad. He developed a bunch of players. And actually, the first year he was at Spurs, they were not good as well. They got 5th that season, playing Ryan Mason and Nabil Bentaleb in midfield. And I remember seeing unrest among Spurs fans, and we were kind of like, is this actually going to work out, this appointment? But he said himself, it kind of takes a year for people to learn how my press works and where they need to be. And then they just took off. And I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen at Chelsea. I would like to see more progress. But I think by the underlying numbers, they've been better than they look in the table. They're probably about 7th, 8th best in the league. And I'm also not sure I'm trying to think of somebody who's had to manage in this situation before, and I'm not sure I can think of them. Like, how many guys have come into an enormous club with enormous pressure, high expectations, but also with an entirely new squad, basically, largely composed of youngsters, some of whom are new to the league, some of whom are new to top flight football altogether. And, you know, sometimes you watch them and you think, wow, it looks like these guys have never played together before. And you're like, yeah, that's basically true. And they're key experienced players, you know, guys like James and Chilwell. Adam Kunku, I think, has been a big miss as well this season. Like, those guys have been injured. And admittedly, you would want to see them be further along. But there have been moments where you kind of see Pochettino football. Like, I think about that 4-4 draw with City. Mm-hmm. Also, the draw with Arsenal at Stamford Bridge, where I thought Chelsea were really impressive for most of the game.
It wasn't Sanchez maybe with that pass out.
Sure, but I mean, but you expect those mistakes. And I think as well, you know, even the victory at Spurs, like, we look back at that now and we say that's a story of red cards. Mm-hmm. But even before the red cards, Chelsea had started to grab hold of the game and go through the gears. And when their high press clicks in, I think this is exactly what good Pochettino football looked like. But if you press really high, when it doesn't work, you look like a mess. Like, that's just how it is. It is. Like, so you look at Chelsea, I was looking at some of their kind of pressing numbers, and like, they've got the 5th most aggressive press in the league, but they're 7th for actually turning the ball over from that press in the final third, and they're 16th for goals from those situations. So they're pressing really high, but they're not actually getting as much traction out of it as you would kind of hope they would. Well, that means that teams are playing through them. Then teams can go up against your defenders, and you don't really want your defenders kind of going one-on-one. So I don't know. I look at them and I think, if there was a better manager out there, like, for example, if Thomas Tuchel was going to become available this summer, like, but, you know, if there was a better manager out there, then I would kind of understand it. But I do just think you have to give him a shot, because if you hire him and sack him after a year, then I'm sorry, you shouldn't have hired him in the first place, because you don't know what Pochettino football's like.
Yeah, and I think I've seen a few people in the fan base say about how, like, obviously this was a decision made by the sporting directors, when Stanley and the other one, his name escapes me, and they'd spent a long time. Obviously, they got rid of Potter and got Frank Lampard in to spend that time like finding the guy. And I think at times, they said about how when Poch first had a video call with them, he said, "Am I being interviewed or am I interviewing you?" In kind of like a way of like finding out about the situation and like trying to find out what's needed from me and so on and so forth. The only issue I have really at the moment is just like some of the decisions I think he's made more recently, and sometimes some of the things he said in the press where it's like you just don't need to say that. For instance, the Sterling one, right? Taking off someone in Mikhailo Mudryk who was really, really good against Leicester for someone who's having a bad game. Like, it's definitely one of the worst games I think Raheem Sterling in Raheem Sterling's career. But choosing to keep Sterling on, like, as a manager, surely you know what's going to happen here. Like, you're going to get unrest within the fan base when you're doing that. You're going to get fans annoyed at you when you make that decision.
But don't you think the fans should shut up a little bit? Like, I mean, like,
I
don't know. I think that if you completely bow, if you completely bow to the fans, then you're never going to get anywhere playing your football, and we'll come on to that with other managers later. But it feels like if a guy's having a really bad game and you take him off, then that is the end of that story. He just had a terrible game and it's an embarrassment for him. If you're the manager and you think we're probably going to win this game anyway, you would be kind of tempted to leave him on and be like, let him redeem himself, because it's such a... If the fans are screaming to take somebody off and then you take them off, then I feel like you're setting a precedent that you're just going to do what you're told by the fans.
But Sterling does come off 10 minutes later. Comes off 10 minutes later.
Sure.
It's almost like a thing of like, okay.
Yeah.
And then that's when the, he almost, it was quite sad, I thought, because he almost got basically booed at times by the fans, which I always think is just something that's just not needed. It's never worth it.
No,
Like,
that's
players have bad games. They really do. And like, it's not needed. Yeah, I think with Poch, it's an interesting one. I don't think... Because his contract is only till the end of next season. He only got given a 2-year deal. And so, like, there's going to have to be a vast change very quickly for next season if we're going to see him maybe get offered a new one. But I also don't think maybe he's the only contributing factor towards the bad season so far this year. Like, there has been a lot of learning. There has been a lot of injuries as well for Chelsea, which we'll get onto as well, about Manchester United.
Isn't your worry, though, that like the financial situation means that the squad is more likely to get worse than better? Like, as in, I'm not the world's biggest Conor Gallagher fan, but I do think he's the guy who's made that midfield kind of stick together for quite a lot of the season. And you might just have to sell these guys because the amortization means that you're like, down 50 mil every summer, regardless of what happens. Yeah. You're in a seriously... Like, the PSR crunch for Chelsea is scary.
I think that could be a whole video in itself, to be quite honest, and actually something that Pochettino can't really help with. I think you've seen him come out several times and he goes, "I love Conor Gallagher, I don't want him to leave." So that'll be interesting. But overall, I do agree. I don't think Pochettino is a bad manager. I think this is a lot of other issues coming into play as well. Because when it's good, it can be really good. And like,
you have looked good in some games this season one. Like, I can see what you're going to do. And I even think, even though Man United are above Chelsea, I've seen more Chelsea games where I'm like, that's what they're trying to do. Than I have of Man United this season. And this is our second season. And I think, let's give Poch one more year. If I was a Chelsea fan, I'd want to see what he does next season.
Yeah. I think the only issue could come into play with what Pat said about a certain Thomas Tuchel being around and like...
Yeah.
God, really? I was joking. What, you think they'll actually do that?
I don't think they'd ever go back. No, I think they've got too much pride to go back to someone like Tuchel. But like, if say Tuchel was about, say Nagelsmann after the Euros ends up leaving, like, would it surprise you when they start like doing a little bit of... Well, they've already been looking at is Amorim at Sporting. They've already been looking at someone like him.
But he's got like a 20 mil buyout. Chelsea actually can't afford that. We still talk about... I think people are kind of used to us saying, the financial situation at that club. And then actually they're kind of fine and it's business as usual. But Chelsea literally can't do anything, basically. They need to sell some homegrown players. Because even if they sold, say, Mudryk this summer, they'd still make a loss on him because they haven't amortized that much of his fee. Yeah. So they need to sell him for like 90 mil to make anything back on that deal.
Make a profit on him.
It's a disaster, Zach. Well, it's a disaster.
It'll all work out.
Couldn't happen to a nicer club.
It'll all work out eventually, that's for sure.
Wouldn't it be awful if Chelsea just like ceased to exist?
It'll all work out eventually. Alex, let's talk more about your manager now. Erik ten Hag and Manchester United. Because if we go back to the end of the season last year, I think Man United fans and maybe football fans in general were quite happy maybe with what Erik ten Hag had done. He'd finished with a trophy in the Carabao Cup. He'd managed to, I think, was it third place you guys finished in the end? He'd also got Ronaldo out of the club, I think.
Yeah,
at that point too. So managed to kind of make a little bit of some moves to players, but brought in some interesting ones as well. Anthony, okay, hadn't worked out, but other ones had been interesting for the summer. Onana was someone that was hugely spoken about. Rasmus Højlund as well, someone who's also this season been fantastic. But we go on to where we are now. I think he has 1 year left on his deal, which would end at the end of next season.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's brand new ownership now in Ineos and Ratcliffe now in charge. And you see rumours about next managers and who could be moving there. Again, one of them we'll talk about in a little bit with Gareth Southgate. But you've also seen them linked with someone. They've also been linked to Graham Potter, who Ratcliffe is a big fan of. It's weird for a guy who, I guess, last season didn't have a bad year at all. How do you feel about Erik ten Hag?
I think this season he's been very disappointing. I think because we're not really seeing the style of play or progress. There's been maybe 4 games this season where I can see what he's trying to do, and I'm like, those were good games. We deserve to win.
See, 4.
4.
Okay.
4 maybe 5. I think like Wolves away, the first half was really good, but the second half we fell apart.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of games where I can see for 30
Chelsea.
minutes what we're trying to do.
Pretty good away at Arsenal.
And then, like I can see what we're trying to do, and then we might collapse a good 20, 30 minutes. But I think, like in general with Ten Hag, I'm very open to giving him 1 more year under Ineos. I think because recruitment's been awful, and I think that isn't ultimately Ten Hag's fault. I know he did push for Anthony 85 million, but if he had someone proper in place, they would have said he's not worth 85 million and wouldn't have allowed that to happen.
True.
So that kind of thing. And I think recruitment's been bad under every manager. But I sort of look at Ten Hag and I said, when we got Ten Hag, because I really wanted him in, because I liked what he did at Ajax, how he played, I said, we've gone through so many managers that we're at the point where I don't think manager is the biggest problem at United. Obviously, it's a part of it. But there's like, whoever the next manager is, if it's someone I want like Ten Hag, I'm just going to say give him 3 years no matter what. And if we don't see the progress, or if it just gets really bad, like we're 14th place, then I'll be like,
Nothing wrong with that.
yeah, we need to go off
done
him. But I think like, I look at him and I think last season, I think he massively overachieved. Like,
Overachieved.
yeah, because we came, 7th under Ragnick, I think, and that was our worst ever Premier League period. And then, we just had a lot of dressing room issues and the culture at the club was bad. And I thought that last season he restored that culture a little bit. And we got that trophy that we needed because it had been 5 years. I thought the football we were playing was all right. It wasn't perfect, but there was progress. You could see what he was trying to do. And I think this summer I really thought we were going to push on. Made a few new signings. I thought we should have probably gone for a DM, but we got Mount. But unfortunately, we've not seen him because he's been injured. Anana, other than the Champions League, has actually been all right. Just the Champions League campaign was a disaster. Højlund's young and raw, and I think he did want Kane, but I think Højlund's shown great potential. Amrabat's just, I don't even know. And I think, like, we've not really seen the new signings other than Højlund, I guess, later on in the season, and Anana's in goal, because Mount's sort of gone there. Recruitment hasn't been good. That I'm kind of like with injuries as well, particularly Martinez and Shaw, because our build-up is literally Martinez and Shaw. Like, that is literally, we're so reliant on them. I'm kind of like, with players back from injury, with a good recruitment, with a good board, with a good structure United, I want to see what you can do in a year's time, because I do think, Ajax have sort of capitulated without him. Obviously, they lost other people. I do think there's a good manager there, and we saw elements of it last season.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially the points where this season for United, like a lot of teams have had a lot of injuries, and United have had arguably maybe the biggest. But when he's had a full fit squad, he has managed to have good games. I think there's a stat here when he's kind of in January, when the treatment room kind of started to clear up a little bit, United won 6 of their first 7 games of the new year. I think the issue sometimes I find when watching United is like, so at the moment, United they do have a way of just winning games. Even if they aren't playing well, they get it over the line. Like
100%.
Everton, was it at Old Trafford more recently, the Everton result? 2-0 to United. United were bad. Like, United weren't good. Everton should have probably got something from that game, but United, yet again, kind of got it over the line, obviously with penalties, and managed to win the game. And that's not just the only time it's happened. It's happened quite a lot. Like Erik ten Hag and Manchester United, Brentford, have. I think you're quite right. When you think about how many games have United been great at this year, it is probably maybe 5, 4. I think of Chelsea. Chelsea, when we came to Old Trafford, you guys were immense and played like this incredible football. But I don't think Erik ten Hag helps himself slightly when when I find people like the average day fan or whatever, right, or some YouTube accounts and whatever it might be, are finding and like seeing his tactical formation as like this high press front line with a low block back line and like a midfield that is almost
space,
go wherever you want. And I think even Carragher called him out on Monday Night Football, and he responded being like, basically kind of biting a bit back at Carragher, but not really explaining his decision as to why or he's doing what he's doing. I think that's where I think as fans and maybe as even the ownership might kind of question it a little bit and kind of what's happening here, because there isn't really or it doesn't feel like it at the moment that there's a smart tactical setup and what's happening, and teams are able to kind of play through it. But that being said, still United do just manage to find ways to win games, which is probably the thing that frustrates me the most, because I generally think United haven't been good this season, but they just
it's that individual quality I think just pulls us through. And like as you sort of said, we have this big gaping hole in our midfield, and I think my biggest criticism of Ten Hag this season has been this isn't working, why does he keep doing it? I know we don't have the players, but there is a massive hole in our midfield. Either get the fullbacks to commit to the press or don't, and like play a high line. Why is there this big hole? We've conceded the second most amount of shots after Sheffield United. I do look at it and I think, okay, we don't really have the personnel in midfield. Like Eriksen's not particularly mobile, Casemiro's not as mobile as he used to be. But that would be my one biggest criticism of Ten Hag is some of it is to do with players, but tactically there is areas for improvement.
And this is also a guy who tactically at Ajax as well, Pat, like has proven that he felt like he knew what he was doing. He had some really interesting ideas, and it's just not kind of prevailed at United so far. Because he even, what was it, last year, or was it the beginning of this season, talking about how he wanted United to be the best kind of counter-attacking team in the world and stuff like this, but just isn't really showing any of this kind of stuff. Like, they are decent at counter-attacks, but with the way you are lining up of having then high line at the front, but then low line at the back, it doesn't quite make sense in what he's doing.
I do think, he had an overwhelming talent advantage in the Netherlands. Obviously he had De Ligt and he had De Jong and a bunch of other like really talented guys who, looking back on it, it's no surprise that they were a mismatch for that league, but they were great in the Champions League as well.
Yeah, semis, wasn't it?
At the same time, United don't really have that much athleticism. There's a reason I think that when Højlund comes on, he looks so bright. And it's because when you look around the squad, you're like, where is the top end pace in this team? Like Rashford.
Yeah.
But then obviously they got rid of Sancho for now. But when you looked at the wings, there wasn't much there as well. There's a reason that when you see Garnacho as well, he looks so bright, because you actually have somebody who athletically can compete in the Premier League. And I really do think that if you're not careful over time, you can just create a squad which is not fast enough, not athletic enough. And I think that goes for the midfield in particular at Manchester United.
What do you think of Mainu?
I think he's a very bright prospect, which is to say that right now he is a below average Premier League midfielder. But that's because he's 18.
Okay.
But you look at him and you're like, this guy's going to be a Manchester United.
Do you think he should be starting? Say everyone's fit, you think he should be starting?
Yeah, definitely. Because the most valuable thing you can do is invest minutes in him at the moment, because you're not going to get Champions League football this season. So you should do the things, everything with United, I always make this point, but everything United should do from now on should be with a view to, we want to win a title in like 2027. 2027, 2028, that kind of... We want to not only win a title, but we want to be regularly competing. If they make decisions for now, this is why I didn't like the Casemiro signing and stuff. If you make decisions for now, then ultimately you're just going to have to make them again in a couple of years' time. And also, if you make win now signings, people expect you to win now. And when the team plays badly, everyone says, well, we paid all this money for these guys who are meant to be peak performers. I think they just need to buy more athletic young players, kind of
100%.
18 to 24 range. And I do agree. Like, I think it would really suck for Ten Hag if he went this summer and then suddenly you start buying these kinds of players and building a sensible squad, and the next manager who comes in gets to benefit from it. Because I don't know. I do think that he's a bad manager in some senses.
In terms of man managing?
No, in terms of being a kind of figurehead for the club.
Okay.
I think he should be allowed to coach, because it's when I see him, bite back at Carragher, or when I see him complaining about decisions from early in the season, I think, this looks weak. And I also think he's been scared for his job and has made decisions based around, oh my God, I've just got to try and like scrape over the line in this game. And as a result, you don't see his football.
Yeah,
and I think he basically, either the two paths to success are either United go and buy so many good players in the summer that he can start playing his football and they just really, really progress. Or he says, I don't care who we've got. I'm now going to play my football and results are going to get worse for a while. But in the long run, it'll be better for us. One of those two things needs to happen. Otherwise, he's going to lose his job and the next guy will benefit.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting what happens. Obviously, as I said, he's got a year until the end of his contract, which would be the end of next season. And Ratcliffe is saying some interesting things in the media about what they want to do in the summer for transfers. He was asked about, you're not going to be in Kylian Mbappe, and he said, I don't want to buy Kylian Mbappe. Practically impossible. I want to buy the next one before him. We want to find him before he becomes a superstar, which, to be honest, is what every club in the world wants to do. Mostly. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens for him. And again, it kind of comes back to that same thing of, are there better managers for Manchester United to get in the summer? We'll see. But let's talk about one of them who will be available in the summer. Thomas Tuchel went to Bayern Munich, and whilst he is still there, his time at Bayern will end at the end of this season. It does look like Bayern Munich won't be winning the Bundesliga for the first time in a very long time. Xabi Alonso and Bayer Leverkusen doing a fantastic job, and where he will end up is another question in itself. But Thomas Tuchel's time at Bayern has been a little bit iffy, really. I think that's one of the best ways to put it. Attacking-wise, they've actually been really strong. Going forward, they've been really, really good. No surprise when you add Harry Kane to your attack, you end up scoring a lot of goals as well. But Jamal Musiala, these guys have all benefited, I think, from having Thomas Tuchel as their manager. The place which is weird to say considering Tuchel's time at Chelsea, is the defence. Defensively, Tuchel's Bayern have been really, really poor. Bayern have actually also suffered the highest percentage of defeats under Thomas Tuchel for any manager since Soren Lerby, who I'd not heard of ever, but that's in 32 years, so a long, long time. And yeah, it's not looking very positive. I think for someone like Thomas Tuchel, who I think when he left Chelsea, he left where kind of it was, everyone looked at it more of like this is a mistake by Chelsea to let him go, not Tuchel's been awful, he needs to go and sack him now. Even though actually towards the end of his time at Chelsea, results weren't going very well for him. And so when he went to Bayern, I think there was a lot of positivity around him joining. This is somebody who's won the Champions League, somebody who can obviously, whilst things on the Nagelsmann hadn't been amazing in ways, but somebody who can kind of get Bayern back to their best per se. And that, I guess, just hasn't really happened so far, Pat, has it?
No, it hasn't. And it's weird that their build-up has been so bad this season. Though I think a lot of us kind of have question marks about some of the talent there. Like Upamecano, for example, that always gets a lot of criticism. And some of the use of Kim Min-jae has been baffling.
Yeah.
The fact that we've seen him on the bench when he seems by far their best centre-back seems very strange. The other thing is that as good as their numbers have been, because right now, if you look at all their underlying numbers, they rate first in Europe. It goes, interestingly, it goes them number 1 and Arsenal number 2 right now. That's an interesting Champions League matchup. But I think the Bundesliga is extremely weak this year. Extremely weak. The bottom of the Bundesliga, I think, is really, really, really bad right now. And I don't know, as well, his kind of complaints about defensive midfield and his desire to get in players, even bad ones, or bad fits like Joao Palhinha. That is kind of the heart of maybe what makes Tuchel not quite as appealing as certain other top managers, which is that he is kind of like a grumbly sourpuss. He does genuinely, every club he's been at, he's ended up in a kind of
dismay. Yeah.
Well, a disagreement with the guys behind the scenes, and so that is a little bit of a concern with him. You think if we get Tuchel in and we give him 4 years, that'll be great. But normally about 2 years in, you think this guy's really annoying. However, of all the managers that we're going to discuss today, I do think he's the best manager. He is. Yes. I think he is a fantastic coach. He's a really great coach. The fact that at Dortmund he played incredibly aggressive attacking football. At Chelsea he played lights out defensive football. And I do think that if Leverkusen weren't both amazing and running hot, then Bayern would just win the league this season, and it wouldn't really be that big a deal. They could. I think they're not very likely to, but they could win the Champions League.
Yeah.
They're on the tougher side of the draw, but if they'd been on the other side, you'd back them to get to the final. So I don't know. I just think even this season, it was really 1 week or about 10 days of terrible results, which took the title away from them. They had obviously the loss to Leverkusen, then I think they drew with or lost to Freiburg or something. But I don't know.
There was like a Lazio defeat in there as well, wasn't there?
Sure, but I mean the Lazio freak result. And they absolutely battered them. This stuff happens. Tuchel is a guy who I still would hire for a lot of top jobs, especially as a sort of palate cleanser. Like if you've been in a bit of a bad cycle and you want somebody to come in and do 2 years of whipping your team into shape and getting them ready for the next phase, Tuchel is a great guy for that. He can play all kinds of different football. He's got a winning record against some fantastic managers. Guys like, Ancelotti have a losing record against Tuchel. So
Pep Guardiola has an interesting record against him as well.
I think Pep Guardiola's record, though, is
generally it's not too bad.
But I mean, it's better against Tuchel. Anyway, I don't know. I just think that every job he's lost, I felt sorry for him losing it. And
the same for Bayern.
Yeah, because Bayern, I think the behind the scenes at Bayern is an absolute disaster. It's full of ex-pros who never shut up. Like when they're not in prison, they are talking to the press about all their criticisms of the
Oliver
squad.
Kahn always at it,
but they don't seem to have any idea what they're doing. And if I were Tuchel, I would also say shut up, leave me alone, and I will coach the team.
But I think that's probably what he said. That's what he said.
Good for him.
What's happened there?
And now they've gone through so many managers that who are they going to hire this summer if they don't get Xabi Alonso? You look at the managers on the market and you're like, well, you've had Nagelsmann, he's gone. You've had Tuchel, he's gone. I don't know if you can get Zidane. Who actually good is available for them this summer?
Doing now?
Who are they going to hire this summer? I don't know.
It's a very good point. It's a very, very good point. Alice, how do you feel about Tommy T?
See, I do like Thomas Tuchel. I think he's a good manager, and I agree with pretty much everything that Pat said about, it was unfair for him to be sacked. I think at all the clubs, you've almost felt sorry for him. I think with the Bundesliga this season, while I don't think Bayern have been amazing, Leverkusen is just a crazy good team that comes around once in a blue moon. I don't think that they would have been stopped by Bayern for the last couple of seasons. I just think that Leverkusen side is on it. I think interesting point that you mentioned that I was thinking of as well is how he's got Chelsea to play defensive football that's kind of suited Chelsea's sort of philosophy of Mourinho and Conte, and then he's gone to Bayern and played more attacking. I think as a manager, I feel like he adapts quite well to what the club wants to do, and I think I look at it because he came in Chelsea mid-season when Lampard came. It looked like the season was gone and he won the Champions League, and that squad for me I wouldn't put anywhere near the Champions League, and they had a lot of young players, Mount, Reece James, all having important stuff. And for me, I think that Tuchel's a good manager because I think he adapts to the clubs he's at. I think that for the most part, he plays quite good football. And I think if you win trophies, he did really well. I know he didn't win the Bundesliga with Borussia Dortmund, but I thought the football he played Borussia Dortmund.
They won a couple of domestic trophies, didn't they?
Yeah, domestic trophies. But the football they played at Dortmund was good. PSG, he was sacked, but I think that was unfair.
And also, PSG's almost like a... any manager here, it could go either way for any of them.
I think PSG and Bayern in recent years have just been one of those where if you don't win the league, you're gone. You're gone.
Definitely.
And it's kind of sometimes you're just not going to quite win the league, but maybe don't just sack them like that. As you said, Nagelsmann, I thought being sacked by Bayern could have been a bit harsh as well. So I think with Tuchel, the next club he goes to, I think he'll succeed.
Yeah. And he took PSG to the Champions League final.
He did.
How many managers have tried to do that? And he's the only one who actually got them there.
He went back-to-back finals. Because he got PSG there, and the next season he took Chelsea there and won it. I think one of the interesting points for Tuchel as well is obviously he's had a little bit of player unrest as well behind the scenes with Bayern. He's kind of blatantly told everyone that Goretzka's a little bit shit. He's also mentioned as well that I think Kimmich he hasn't quite got on with too. And so but the thing is, Tuchel is a big personality. He's someone that comes in and is someone that has a bit of wants to do a bit of kind of man management, and he does want to kind of get. It's funny because he's one of the managers who will say, "I don't want to be involved in transfers. I don't want to be involved in transfers," but then wants to be involved in transfers. I remember Raheem Sterling joined Chelsea because Thomas Tuchel wanted him at Chelsea, and then it didn't quite work out for him there. I do just kind of wonder though for now, what club is left for him to go to, and is there? Is it with Tuchel? Do you think maybe he kind of needs a not the number one team in the league, but maybe the second or third best team in the league to try and be at, so for it to be successful, where he doesn't have the pressure of being you've got to win the league every single year, if that makes sense.
Who are you asking?
Well, you, Pat. It was
all right.
Towards you.
Maybe. But I think, look, he hasn't managed in Italy. I think that there are good jobs to be had there. There are rumours about Barcelona, which I think would be a significant upgrade on Xavi. And I think he can definitely play, kind of like Alice was saying, like he can adapt to the style that they want to play. They've got a bunch of young kids who need direction, and there are significant rumours out of Barcelona that they're looking for a German type manager to play, I guess, like high pressing, aggressive football. Man. Yeah, because he can play possession football, but he's not going to just like. He's a little bit less naive than someone like, I don't know, Sarri, who was rumoured when he was coming out of Napoli. So I don't know. I think that would be a lot of fun. And especially because Barcelona need a firm hand. Like Barcelona need somebody who says to their board, like, just stop getting your hands in this and just let me get on with it and really take charge of guys like Yamal and turn them into something special. So I could see him doing that. Other than that, I think probably a move back to the Premier League would make the most sense, because I don't think Germany have got a team good enough for him at the moment.
If say Xabi Alonso goes to Bayern, do you think Liverpool look at him? Obviously, he's been at. I know there's the classic like Dortmund, both of them being at Dortmund, and like I don't think Tuchel had a. As I said earlier, I don't think Tuchel did bad to his rep when he left Chelsea. Like I think Liverpool could be an interesting one for them, especially with the players that he's got there. Jesus, he'd have a great time there, that's for sure.
Would Tuchel tempt you to get rid of Ten Hag? Is there anyone on the market who you would be tempted to get rid of Ten Hag for?
I just not really.
Like, love the guy.
I am a bit of a Ten Hag backer. Like, I will back him. And if it's really bad this time next year, then I'm said, look, you've got your 3 seasons.
Yeah.
I just said the next manager, if he's someone I want, I'm going to give him 3 years no matter what. Unless Pep Guardiola or Jurgen Klopp come to Ratcliffe and say, I want the Man United job.
Which would actually be incredible.
Then yeah, I'm sticking with Ten Hag.
Okay. No, that's fair enough. Okay, then we mentioned him earlier on. Let's jump over to Graham Potter, because this is someone who actually hasn't had a job since he left Chelsea. The amount of managers that we're going to talk about today that have been linked that have been at Chelsea or linked to is ridiculous, by the way. Anyway, Graham Potter hasn't actually had a job since he left Chelsea. He's kind of been doing not much. I read that he bought a house in Sweden. There was rumours he was going to get the Sweden international job, but didn't take that in the end. And then he also went to the Falklands as well and did a talk there to the British Army or whatever people that were there or something. There was some link there. It was a bit of a weird one. I went in a bit of a loophole, I'm not going to lie.
That is a weird one.
Anyway, let's talk about Graham Potter, because again, I mentioned it earlier with Ratcliffe. He's meant to be a big fan of Potter. There's the kind of the links there to Manchester United. And with the way things ended at Chelsea, like Potter was meant to be the guy at Chelsea who came in with this new ownership and kind of smart way of playing, and had such a fantastic time at Brighton and even at Swansea as well when he was there, and built himself up. We've spoken many times about how he went from this university kind of team and going all the way to the top and ending up at Chelsea, and things not working out. But what kind of respect level do you think that is still there, Alice, for Potter? Like, do you think teams out there like Manchester United, I know with Ratcliffe it's a little bit different, but these top level clubs are looking at someone of his talents? Like, I know he rejected the Lyon job when they were kind of bottom of the league in Ligue 1. Where do you think he's at in terms of his career?
I think with Graham Potter, it would be really unfair to judge him off his time at Chelsea. It was so short-lived, and I think Chelsea was such a mess behind the scenes, the recruitment, everything going on. It was kind of a mess that it was almost like a very hard job for anyone to succeed in.
As we've seen,
even Poch, who has more experience in maybe bigger clubs, he's going to need time. And I think, like, from Brighton, I thought Graham Potter was fantastic. He played good football. We did a really good job. Obviously, De Zerbi's coming in. It's almost outshone him in that sense. Yeah. It's a difficult one because I think he struggled at Chelsea, but I don't necessarily think that was mostly his fault. I think maybe dealing with some of the bigger names and man management and player power could be something he struggles with. Like, I saw a lot of Man United fans when we're linked to Potter because he's rumoured to be like Ineos's first choice because of, obviously, we get Ashworth in as well, and he's got links to Potter, and obviously Ratcliffe likes him. And a lot of people were outraged, and I said, look, I don't want Ten Hag to go, and I would, I'd want Ten Hag over Potter, but I was like, worst case scenario, if Ineos make a decision to sack Ten Hag and bring in Graham Potter, I don't necessarily think it would be a bad appointment for United. He's not on my list, it's not something I would do, but I do think he played good football at Brighton, and I think if he had a good structure around him, which we don't have at United, but I'm hoping Ratcliffe is going to implement with Ashworth. I think if the right structures and systems were in place and the right players were bought for Potter, he could succeed, because he did that at Brighton quite well. But it's just Brighton to Man United is like a crazy step. Like even to Chelsea, again, unsustainable sort of where he was at Chelsea, but that's such a big step that almost would he need like a little bit of a stepping stone between? I don't know.
Well, there were rumours about when the Palace job was available, that there were talks there. I mean, this is already the longest time he's not had a job in management since 2008, when he was in the non-leagues. Pat, how are you feeling about someone like Potter? Like, do you think he needs the stepping stone kind of thing, because before kind of getting one of these big jobs again? If, say, De Zerbi ends up on the move in the summer, could a reunion with Brighton happen?
I think he probably does need it, at least in the eyes of like British fans and press.
Yeah.
Not necessarily abroad. You know, there were rumours he was in the frame for the Napoli job, and I think that Lyon job would have actually been pretty interesting, especially because of the quality of their academy. I think that would have benefited him, especially the way he developed young players at Brighton. And that Brighton success wasn't a mirage, you know? Like it was real. They played great football. They took some big scalps. Their underlying numbers were always better than their actual results. But I think that would kind of come around. And in a way, I'm kind of glad that De Zerbi has had a more difficult season this year, because I think that last year people were saying, look, you know, maybe Potter was holding this Brighton team back, and now everyone's kind of like, oh no, actually, like they're not the third best team in the league or something. I wonder if a sort of West Ham level job, you know, like say Villa had been available, like that would have been interesting. Or even if, I mean, I wouldn't sack Cal, but say Newcastle were looking for a coach in the summer, that would be interesting too. I think he probably needs to be rehabilitated, just because if you're seen to have failed in the UK, then like it's a disaster and nobody's ever going to trust you again. But he plays attractive football. He did it with pretty limited talent. He's definitely someone I keep an eye on. He's a little bit older than you think he is. You know, like he's 48, you know, so he's not like a guy who's just coming through, but he's young enough that he can learn some new stuff. So I would not hire him at sort of a Spurs level job now, but after he's done a more kind of upwardly, say Frank left Brentford, Potter to Brentford, that would be great. I would really like to see that.
I could see that happening.
I also think somebody should hire Frank.
Thomas Frank. I mean,
I think he's a great coach.
He is a good coach.
Very flexible.
Brentford aren't doing as well this season, but
I mean,
we'll see. Let's move on to Jose Mourinho.
God.
Excuse me. Jose Mourinho, Pat. Is Jose Mourinho a bad manager?
I don't think he's bad. You know, like it wasn't like Roma were a disaster under him, but they weren't especially good, and they kind of trended down each season he was there, which is unusual for him and not a great sign.
Yeah,
I do think football's left him behind a little bit. Like he always wanted to play low block football, which kind of relied on brilliance from your attackers, and when you get slightly worse talent, your ability to be calm under pressure at the back and pick up every runner kind of diminishes, and the ability of your attackers to create something out of nothing by themselves also diminishes. Those are problems for Mourinho ball. I also think teams over the last 10 years have got better at disrupting low blocks. So in a way, tactically, he might have just seen the football world kind of move on. However, I think that if you put him in charge of a national team, for example, I think he could be a really good manager.
I've wanted to see Jose as an international manager for years.
Yeah, he's got everything you like. National team football lends itself to conservative, just sensible football, which basically maximizes the talent available. And also, if you were managing England, I would genuinely say like he's a good manager for you.
And also, generally, international football tournaments seem to be won more on a defensive style of play rather than a fluid attacking kind of style too, as well. You look at Didier Deschamps and his kind of France victories. They have been normally, but obviously helps when you've got someone like Kylian Mbappe up top as well, who can kind of just do whatever he needs to, or even Antoine Griezmann. But generally, it's normally built off of a strong defence, which Jose can arguably build as well. I mean, his win rate at Napoli is the lowest of his career, I think just under 50%. However, kind of expected as well, because he's gone from teams who were the level of Real Madrid and Manchester United and Chelsea, so on and so forth. And this is sort of someone who no one was expecting Roma to go on and win the league, apart from Henry Hill, actually, to go on and win the league. But generally, I think he's done... I don't know, I just don't know what the next thing is for him, because like I don't know whether he'd ever go lower than somewhere like Roma. Like whilst when he joined Roma weren't like winning Serie A. They were still obviously a historic big team that were trying to challenge for top four. And I don't know if there are any other teams now that would look at that are challenging for top four or a Champions League place and look at Jose and go, we want him to come in now. Maybe Newcastle. If Eddie Howe was to move on. I mean, that rumour's kind of always been circulating. But he did obviously win Roma their first European trophy since, or just trophy in general, for 14 years. The Europa Conference League, and then obviously reached the final in the Europa League the following year as well. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one. De Rossi's come in now. New manager De Rossi, flying. They've lost one game so far under him, so it will be interesting to see how things end up with him. Alice, where do you think Jose should go?
I do agree with the international shouts. I think, as you said, like historically, he's a brilliant manager. You know what he's done at Chelsea, Inter. You know the Champions League with Porto. There's no denying there's a great manager there, but football, I feel like, has moved past him a little bit. One thing you do get with Mourinho is he wins trophies. You know, I think international and maybe knockout tournaments seem to be a speciality. I don't see him winning the league anywhere, but he will win that trophy in Europe because it's a little bit different knockout football. Even Man United, he's been our most successful manager post Alex Ferguson with the Europa League and the success there. And I think if I look at Jose, he's a guy that comes in, he could win you the Europa League, he can win you this cup, that cup, but he's not going to win you the league because I think football's moved on. I saw someone talk about the Premier League the other day and they said it's almost going a little bit more like the Bundesliga, and more teams are trying to play an expansive attacking style of football, and it's a lot more open and players need to be more athletically better and stuff. And I think, you know, Mourinho's style doesn't really suit the Premier League. I think out of the big leagues it probably would have been most suited to Serie A, but it's not worked there. So I think with Mourinho, I just see him being international football, really. I don't know where I could see him going. Like, I feel like, you know, Portugal, you know, they won the Euros with quite a defensive manager, as you said. Like, I think I just see him as he wins trophies, but I don't think the way that football's moving, the modernness of football, how you rebuild a club, bring in youth, play expansive football, I think. Especially
with clubs as well now, also having like sporting directors and massive structure behind it. Like, that's not something Jose really, I think, would enjoy working within. I do wonder as well, as like, sometimes I think with Jose too, international football could be really nice, where like the players aren't getting too much of Jose. Every 2 weeks, once every month for a few months, like they go away for a week and they deal with Jose, and like he can kind of be that man manager for them internationally, and really help them on that side. But it's not too much where it's happening all the time like it is at club level. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to see. I mean, whilst talking about international managers, let's talk about Gareth Southgate then, because again, with Manchester United, we've seen the rumours that again he's been looked at there. But with Southgate, it's an interesting one because obviously the title is about, are these managers actually bad? And Southgate has done a lot of good for England. Yet I do feel like sometimes, or I do feel like there is a general consensus about whether he's actually, though, a good manager. He's done very good things for England, got them very far. England have a lot of talent as well coming through. And he's really helped. We've heard all the time about like kind of behind the scenes and making players kind of, there's no like this club bias and all that kind of stuff. He's been very good on that stuff. But as a manager for football on the pitch, is he good, Alice?
As you said, I think the culture of England is probably one of the reasons we've got better in recent years. I think we had like all those brilliant big name players and there was just so little success. We were massively underperforming when we had, you know, Rio, Lampard, Gerrard, we had all these great talents, and it was because of the culture of England. And I had to do a bit of research on Ashworth, who worked at England because he was obviously been linked to the United job and probably going to go there. And I sort of, him and Southgate worked quite well together to change the culture of England. They had this thing of only the shirt size changes, and they instilled this culture in like the youth of England. And I think that is a big part of maybe the success of England later on. Just really, maybe the man management of Southgate in the sense of his relationship with most of the players. I think it's a good positive environment. The England camp looks good, and I think that's why we've been better. But I think with Southgate, he's more of raising the floor, but maybe not so much the ceiling. I think you look at the 2018 Russia World Cup, very low expectations. I think that was one of our weakest World Cup squads we'd had. But it almost felt like, I know we didn't win it, but getting to the semi-final and being, a little bit unlucky not to get through. Croatia did do well though. I think, we all were like, whoa, like we've done something here, because I don't think that squad was particularly talented.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a good squad, but not compared to the squads we've had in the past. And he got the most out of, an all right bunch of players. He created this culture, a feel-good feeling. But I think you look at England now, the Bellinghams, you've got some absolutely world-class players. Foden, Saka. I mean, Cole Palmer coming through as well is really talented. Declan Rice, Harry Kane, obviously top players. There's so many top players in that England squad. So many players like Foden that can play such a technical, advanced style of football. And I guess we talk about international managers being a bit more defensive, but I do think he can raise the floor, but can he raise the ceiling of those players?
Yeah.
And I think he's done a good job, but I think there's probably another manager that could do better with that squad. I think obviously he's here for the Euros, but if he doesn't win it, and the football isn't super convincing, I think he's got to go after the Euros.
I think whatever happens, I think if he won it, or if he comes second or semis, quarters, goes out in the groups, I think whatever happens, he does move on.
Yeah.
Pat, how do you feel about someone like Southgate? Because again, done a lot of good for England internationally, but if he was to go to a Manchester United, a club level football club, because there's talks as well that he might go back into the FA after the England job, how do you think he'd fare if he was managing in the Premier League?
I probably wouldn't do that. Like, I like the guy, and it sounds like he's a good administrator, kind of, but I don't think he's a particularly sophisticated tactician, and we haven't really seen that from him. As an outsider, as somebody who doesn't support England, I'm always amazed the way people talk about England, where they're like, this player doesn't deserve to be dropped, from the squad, and they aren't really asking the opposite question of, well, could we be better if we moved on from this guy to somebody more talented? And I think the same thing kind of has to apply to Southgate. Like, does Southgate would he deserve to be sacked by England? No. But England now do not really have a flawed squad. England have one of the most talented pools of players in the world. And I just think that you could probably go to another level with the players at your disposal now. Plus, international management used to be a retirement home for guys who didn't have it anymore. And that's less true now than it's ever been. This summer at the Euros, Nagelsmann's going to be there. Spalletti's going to be there. These are top-class managers. Those guys are both in the top 20 managers in the world, in my opinion. Southgate is, like a guy. He's a nice guy, and I think he's done good work on that squad. But I think the nature of the talent available to him now demands something more. You look at that squad, and if they end up not winning a trophy, I do think that will be considered a major disgrace in years to come. Like, seriously. Like, I think this is as good as, like, the golden generation in terms of the balance of talent.
Yeah.
Like, maybe not in, like, maybe some of the individuals were greater there, but who knows how good someone like Saka or Foden will end up being. I just think that it's probably a good time to think about moving on from him. And it seems to me like there are gains to be made. As for team management week in, week out in the Premier League, I struggle to see Southgate like out managing Arteta, Guardiola, like even sophisticated managers, who've been around a while but are not like amazing, like Moyes, or Dyche. Like these are guys who know what they're doing and have built teams. I just don't know whether Southgate could do that.
Yeah. And even if you look back at his previous time in club management, it wasn't. I think there's a reason why he left that to go into the pursuit of what he did behind the scenes at the FA, and then eventually the big job. Excuse me. Last one then. Our last manager, Xavi. Barcelona's legend and manager, Xavi, who is going to be leaving Barcelona as it stands at the end of the season. Barca had a really good result, not most recently, against Atletico Madrid. If you look at the squad as well, like it's almost like since he said this, not almost like, but he's gone, okay, I'm going to play even more of the La Masia Academy graduates now. He's just gone, okay, how old are you? 16? You're in the squad. How old are you? 17? You're in the squad. And it's kind of paying off for him. Like against Atleti, you look at the side without a few key players as well. He's done really, really impressive things. And I think sometimes with Xavi, you've got to also remember this was a Barcelona side now post-Messi, where for years and decades, the whole kind of way of Barcelona playing football was get the ball to Messi and let him do the final part. And he had to develop a way of playing football without that. And there have been a lot of lows, but there have also been a lot of highs, winning La Liga, being really strong in that. Then also trying to kind of bring through some of these academy kids, which he's done, I think, to a successful job as well. And I think even this summer, like two of his favourite players in Busquets and Dembele left, and he's had to try and replace them in some way, shape or form. He's had injuries as well so far this season. And so I do think he's done a good job. However, I can also understand why he would want to move on, or why they want to move on from him to go towards another manager. Like we mentioned, Thomas Tuchel could be is a step up, in my opinion, on someone like Xavi. But when he has also brought through like these guys like Pau Cubarsí, is that how it says, something like that? Pau Cubarsí, the centre back, really impressive. Fermin Lopez was a guy who was kind of, no one thought he was a world beater, but managed to bring him in. He was really impressive against Atletico Madrid. Like, I feel like when we talk about Xavi, Pat, you're not his biggest fan, which is fair enough. But I feel like he has done well in his time there.
Yeah, he's done all right. Last season I thought they were a bit lucky to win the league, though then this season I think they're a bit unlucky, as in their numbers domestically are much better than Real Madrid's. And I'd certainly say that Real Madrid have a better squad. He's very conservative. And the thing I find weird about Xavi is like the disconnection between the way he talks about football and talks about Barcelona and the way he actually plays. So in interviews, he's always talking about like dominating the ball and like wiggle the position and all this kind of stuff. And then when you actually see him play, you're like, this is international football. Like, he is really conservative. Everybody holds their positions. Nobody really does anything exciting, which is why I think Dembele was such a useful player for them to have. I also think he's incredibly wasteful with talent acquisition. You look at guys they brought in like Ferran Torres, Rafinha, Koundé, Lewandowski, and some of these I think were a bit wasteful because of the stage they were at their career, and others I think were wasteful because he was like, I really want this guy. And then, Aubameyang, let's get him in. Oh, wait, I hate him. Get him out. Like, that sort of thing, I think is not what Barcelona needs financially, but also I just think it's bad for the club to have turnover in those positions. I don't know. Like, yeah, he's been okay. I think better managers are available. Like, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And when you look at actual Barcelona football, does he play Barcelona football? Not really. Like, Barcelona were always a press and possess team. They were really good at winning the ball back in the final third. Now they're mid-table at that. They used to dominate territory, really hold the ball in the final third, pin you in and pick you apart. Now they do that to a much lesser extent than they did even with, like, Valverde, who was, like, quite a conservative coach as well. I just don't really... I think Xavi leaving is probably good for Xavi's reputation as a Barcelona legend.
Okay,
because he gets to go before like Mbappe arrives and Real Madrid like absolutely eat them every season. But would I hire him elsewhere? Like, not really. Like, he needs to go and improve as a coach, I think.
I do wonder where like that next stage could be for him. Alice, how do you feel about Xavi? And where do you think something like that is for him next? Like, because Barcelona's a massive job, and like there's a little bit, and I mean, his job before Barca wasn't like he was dominating Serie A or doing really well in Ligue 1. It was very much, he only got the job really because of his player status there. How do you feel about Xavi?
I think when you look at the great managers of Barcelona, like Pep Guardiola, he's not in that bracket. I don't necessarily think he's a bad manager, and I think the squad he's had to deal with at Barcelona is one of their weakest squads. You look at the squad that Pep had. Obviously, Pep's at levels ahead as a manager, but that squad Pep had was unbelievable. Yeah. They're obviously missing Messi. The team isn't as good as it used to be, and I think he's done well considering he's a relatively young, unexperienced manager coming into Barcelona, bringing through some young players, and the football they play is all right. It's nothing like amazing, but it's nothing like shocking. They won the league. They've been okay this season. They're still in the Champions League, actually. I was putting for the Europa.
True. Yeah.
Like, I don't...
Against PSG.
I think, like, when I look at Xavi winning the league and, he's been semi-successful at Barcelona. Like, he did win the league. I think, so I'd take any manager to win the league for Man United, Even if the football wasn't the best, I just want to win the league. But I've not watched loads and loads of his Barcelona in La Liga to really judge him solely as a manager. But I look at the young players, I look at the league, they've never been awful, but they're just not where Barcelona want to be. Yeah. I think he's one of those where if you sacked him, you could say it was a little bit unfair. But there's better managers out there, and you could understand if they sacked him because there's going to be better people available.
I wonder if and big if they won the Champions League, would suddenly like things change and they could keep him. It wouldn't shock me too much if that's what happened in the end.
Do you not think? But he's the one who said I'm going to leave.
He did.
So I think if he won the Champions League, he'd be like, all the more reason for me to walk
maybe.
with. I've won the league and the Champions League. Like I've got. How could I possibly do better than this?
Yeah,
I'm just going to
actually.
leave before it gets bad. Bye.
Yeah, okay. But then also, everyone gets a little bit egotistical, I guess, and would be like, oh, I'm the best ever. I'm going to stay.
Well, Xavi does have that,
Exactly.
that issue, but at least when he was a midfielder, he actually arguably was the best ever.
Yeah, true.
Now he's a manager. He's Spanish. So
Maybe-
that's a benefit, I guess, for Barcelona.
Maybe he ends up at Brentford. Frank to Barca, Xavi to Brentford.
Great.
We'll see what happens. Ivan Toney
great
and
job
Xavi
swap.
linking up together. Well, there we have it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Alice, thank you for coming onto the channel. If the people at home want to check you out, what is your channel? What clubs and what football do you talk about?
Thank you very much, Zach, for having me on. If you want United content, it's on Alice Talks Football. We just talk about United every single day, all the news. And then my second channel, Aquila Football, is basically all things sort of football, match reactions, transfer news, talking about players and stuff.
Amazing. Patrick Van Straten, you have a podcast as well, don't you?
Yeah, Unseen Incidents with me and Pete Dorman. You can find us at patreon.com/PatrickVS. That's where you can subscribe for extra episodes, but also we're on every podcast app. Check it out. I can't remember what we're talking about at the moment. I think we're looking at the Champions League draw because it's so insane.
It is. It's really fun.
Yeah.
I think the best thing is that it's going to have. There's going to be a team in there that is kind of like a little bit of an underdog, and it'll be really fun if they went all the way to win it. And also, finally, guys, thank you so much to today's sponsor of the video, Surfshark VPN. If you guys go into the description, the top, there'll be a link right there where you can go and download Surfshark. I'll also put the QR code on screen right now. And if you use the code Djellab, you'll get an extra 3 months for free as well. They've been fantastic and we really do appreciate it. Get in the comments below, like the video and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye.